I personally feel and what I've experienced in my own work is that the act of making space for people to tell their stories and truly listening to what they
Mhm.
have to say is one of the highest forms of respect of any
Yeah.
person, not just in a research setting. And that act of making space for the storytelling and the act of listening that comes with it really are central activities in qualitative research.
You're listening to Community Level, a podcast where public health research meets real world impact. Brought to you by the Community Health Sciences Division of the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. We bring you real conversations with researchers, practitioners, community leaders, and organizations working to create healthier communities. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in on today's episode of the Community Level Podcast. My name is Cenia, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Tiffany Ford, who's an assistant professor in the Community Health Sciences Division at the School of Public Health here at UIC. As both a professor and a public health researcher, Dr. Ford uses qualitative, quantitative, spatial, and mixed methods approaches to investigate how anti-Black structural racism lives and operates in policy, governance, and social norms, and contributes to the unequal distribution of resources that inevitably play a role in the subjective well-being. She also studies what is being done about those unequal distributions and how community-centered research strategies can lead to more equitable public health policies and health outcomes. Dr. Ford, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Before I walk our audience through what we're going to be talking about today, would you maybe like to share a little bit more about yourself, your role at UIC, and what drew you into research?
Yeah, so, okay, well, hey, listeners. My name is Tiffany Ford. I am an assistant professor in the Community Health Sciences Division in the School of Public Health. Outside of being a researcher, I love playing football and taking long walks with my pit bull dandelion. And I study subjective well-being or self-reported quality of life along the life course. And I use a lot of different research methodologies in my work. But I am here today to talk mostly about qualitative research and my work doing community engaged qualitative methods.
I love it. I love it. Dandelion, super cute. I've seen pictures and they're adorable. All right, so just to give our audience a little sneak peek into today's conversation, and if you guys haven't already guessed it, folks, today we're going to be talking about research and specifically qualitative research, what makes it rigorous, how we as public health students and practitioners can center the voices of communities in order to empower the communities that we work alongside with, especially after we graduate and so on and so forth. To get us started, and so our listeners have a little bit of an understanding and like a basis to the conversation, can you maybe define qualitative research and explain how it differs from quantitative research?
Yeah, for sure. So, qualitative research is an approach to research that uses textual, visual, or audio sources as data. Qualitative research is really focused on assessing social processes and their meanings. And when I say social processes, I'm talking about human actions, reactions, interactions, and the rules, routines, rituals, relationships, and roles that structure our lives. And so, qualitative research, or qual, as I might call it, differs from quantitative research, or quant, really in kind of a lot of different ways. So, for example, like I said, qual data is, words, images, audio, and the meaning of that data really can't be captured or fully counted or measured in that sort of way. Whereas, quant, on the other hand, centers on data that can be reflected by counts or ratios and things like that. So, qual and quant differ in a lot of little ways like that, but the overarching difference between qual and quant is in the different research paradigms that
Yeah.
guide each methodology. So, In quantitative research, the goal is, to get the answer. Like we understand that answer is this single, knowable, objective reality or truth that
Mhm.
can be well represented by this objective researcher who is
Mhm.
analyzing these pre-specified measurable variables and their relationships in statistical models. But qualitative research is, it's guided by an entirely different paradigm. So in qual, we recognize that there are multiple realities and therefore multiple truths. And
Mhm.
these realities can be seen through different perspectives of differently situated people. And
Mhm.
these subjective data can be collected and interpreted by a subjective researcher that is actively aware of and attentive to their biases. So these two approaches, at their core have fundamentally different understandings about truth, reality, the source of
Mhm.
knowledge, and the role of the researcher in all of that.
That was like perfectly stated. 10 out of 10. Thanks so much for distinguishing those. I think it's really important to kind of like, just stage the conversation as we move forward and, differentiate the two. So that was like perfectly stated. I guess moving forward then jumping right into the conversation, I guess, like how can qualitative methods be used to center voices that are traditionally like excluded from research or decision making spaces, for example?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be annoying, okay? At
Do
first,
it.
I just want to name that qualitative research is not inherently good and quantitative research is inherently bad, right?
Yeah.
You've heard me say this so many times in our qualitative research methods class last semester, but it feels important to say out loud here as
Yeah.
well. It's possible to center voices and experiences of people who are historically excluded in quantitative research,
Mhm.
but it's just done much less frequently than in qual, probably because quant in general isn't oriented in a way where that kind of power sharing is valued, right? Like, so just throw back to my answer to the previous question. That being said, though, there are critical quantitative researchers who are actively working to change that.
Mhm.
But your actual question about how can qualitative methods be used to center traditionally excluded voices, I'd say, at the most basic level,
Mhm.
qualitative methods give people room to tell their stories in their own words.
Mhm.
People get to decide how to describe their own experiences rather than being limited by like a four option, like pre-decided response categories, as is
Mhm.
common in like survey research, for example.
Yeah.
And I just, what I personally feel and what I've like experienced in my own work is that the act of making space for people to tell their stories and truly listening to what they
Mhm.
have to say is one of the highest forms of respect of any
Mhm.
person, not just in a research setting. And that act of making space for the storytelling and the active listening that comes with it really are central activities in qualitative research.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really like how you said, like, making space for their voices, right? Like, I think we talked a lot about that, during your class last semester too. Even when you kind of like describe like when you would have focus groups and sometimes there'd be people who like would speak for really long periods of time, but you want to hear the stories, right? Like you want to let them have that space, but also at the same time use that moderator skill, right? To kind of like
Right.
the
It's a
conversation.
skill set for sure.
So I totally get it. But no, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I guess moving on, what does it look like in practice to move from like studying a community to actually like listening and viewing them as knowledge holders and collaborators?
Yeah. I think that in practice, this might sound a little what do they say? A little woo woo, but in practice, I think it starts in the head and in the heart.
Yeah.
So I think once your spirit is aligned with the concept of valuing all people and all
Mhm.
sources of knowledge equally, the
Yeah.
decisions that need to be made to make that a reality really just kind of flow from there.
Mhm.
And at its core, I think it's about relationships, it's
Mhm.
about trust, it's about partnership, it's about respect. I think that humility and honesty. on the part of
Mhm.
the academic researcher matters a lot. And
Mhm.
also reflexivity, which is a term that we use a lot in the qualitative research methods course. And reflexivity is the practice of critical self-examination where
Mhm.
you reflect on your own experiences, your own biases, and really consider how it might be showing up or how it might show up in the future, right? And influence your assumptions or actions in your
Mhm.
research. And I think that when you sort of like are actively engaging in this practice of reflexivity, it really just helps to inform your thoughts and your decisions about how you can really facilitate this shift.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. I feel like I really like how you opened it up with, like, starts from the head and the heart, like, understanding that everyone's in the same playing field, right? Like, the academic researcher is not above the community members. Like, if anything, we're collaborators, we're working together on this. Like, we should all be seen as equal when it comes to these spaces, 'cause that at that point, if it's not, then it feels really extractive, right? And, like,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to step away from because we know the harm that it causes to communities, so definitely agree. I guess like a follow-up to that question is like, does like the community-based participatory research approach help facilitate that shift? And if so, like in what ways do you think?
I think I think I wouldn't say that a community-based participatory research approach facilitates the shift. I think I would say that the orientation of the researcher
Mm,
facilitates a shift to a community-based participatory research approach.
mhm,
Like,
yep.
I think you do community-based participatory research because you realize that you can't best answer your question without it. And like community-based participatory research is great, but I do not want to make it sound all sunshine and rainbows either,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like for those of
Me
us who are listening, who are students or who have ever participated in a group project, we all know that group projects are hard. They take more time, they take more meetings, they can be frustrating. And community-based participatory research is one big old group project. And it's a group project with honestly potentially more at stake.
Yeah.
It's not about a grade, it's about individual and institutional trust.
Mhm.
And I know for me, like whether I'm trying to be or not, when I'm in my community-based participatory research project meetings, I'm not
Mhm.
just Tiffany Ford, like the researcher or the girl who loves to watch University of Miami football. I am a representative of the University of Illinois Chicago, of the
Yeah.
School of Public Health, and sometimes
Mhm.
of academia in general. And that's whether I want to be or not.
Yep.
And like I'll say though, over the years, my community-based research projects have been some of the most fulfilling research that I've had the opportunity to participate in. And they have also been the most time and energy intensive projects that I've had the opportunity to participate in.
Yeah.
But, I take that approach because that's how my heart is oriented.
Yeah.
And because being in close community with non-academic researchers, like that's what feeds my spirit. That's what helps
Mhm.
to keep me returning to this work, day after day, week after week, year after year. And it's what enhances my ability to ask and answer research questions that actually matter to the people that I care about the most.
Yeah. That's spoken as a true researcher. That was great.
Like,
And
I
I
just have to
think
be honest, like,
yeah, and as you should be, like this is one a space for you to do that, right? And two, like I agree, right? It's not how does it facilitate, but it's mostly like the shift in the researcher to be like, oh, I'm going to do this type of research, right? And ultimately to answer a question, but how do you answer it most appropriately with the community that you're working with, right? With the community, not on the community that we're working with, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess moving forward, how do you think like qualitative research actively challenges extractive practices, or in what ways do you think that it challenges like extractive research practices, for example, in quantitative methods?
So when you say extractive research practices,
Mhm.
I'm assuming you're referring to when researchers show up in community settings, take what they need, and then head on out without any attempts to offer anything to the community that they learn from in return. And so if that's what you mean,
That's
I would
exactly what
say, how does qualitative research actively challenge that? My answer is simple. It does not, right?
it
For
is.
all of the reasons that I've already alluded to. Like, I don't know. I try to be really thoughtful
Yeah.
and not hype up qual while belittling quant, because the truth is that it really
Mhm.
isn't that simple, right? Both research methodologies have the potential for extraction and harm. Like, you can pop in and do a focus group and skedaddle just as easily as you could pop in and conduct a survey and peace out, right? Like, it's not about the methodology, it's about your values as a researcher and the theoretical framework that you choose to guide your work.
Mhm.
For example, folks who describe their work as quote unquote critical, for
Yeah.
example, like critical qualitative, critical quantitative, those folks are being intentional about distinguishing themselves as researchers who are concerned with power relationships, and they're
Mhm.
communicating a commitment to do research ethically and in a
Mhm.
way that does not reinforce historical injustices. So
Mhm.
yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's more about the frameworks that you apply that
Yeah.
guide your decision making in your work, that guide, the extent to which you feel required to report back, the extent to which your
Mhm.
research questions and research products are guided by the community members or the community organization that you're working with on the project. Like, those are decisions that need to be made along the way. Those aren't decisions that are inherent to any particular methodology.
Mhm. I think I remember when we were in class too, it's like we got to think about it at every stage of the research process, right? Not just at the end of like, oh, let me go back and no, it's like how do we incorporate the community at every level, every stage to make sure that, we're not quote unquote being extractive or et cetera, et cetera. It's like the methods and the ways that we do it, right? So
Absolutely.
definitely agree. And yeah, like I think like inherently, like when we think about quantitative, it often feels like, oh, like it's there for the money, maybe that's why people think like, oh, it's more extractive, right? Because like often it's used as this way to like get your coin, or it's seen as more rigorous compared to like
Hmm.
so that kind of goes into my following question of like quantitative research is often described as more rigorous, compared to qualitative research. What do you think gets overlooked about qualitative research in regards to rigor?
Man, you are so right that quant is so often described as more rigorous relative to qual, and it that really grinds my gears. Um, because like qual is also often looked at as easier than quant.
Yes, I
Yeah,
know.
and I'm a mixed methodologist, right?
Yeah.
I've said up front of this conversation that I use a variety of methodologies in my research.
Mhm.
I'm trained in both qualitative and quantitative methods. So I feel very confident in saying that in my experience, qualitative research is much more complex and time and resource
Yeah.
intensive, especially
Mhm.
if you're collecting your own data.
Yeah.
So that is like a super frustrating idea that's out
Yeah.
there. I do think
Totally.
though that the overarching view that qual is less rigorous, I do think it's like thankfully kind of starting to change
Yeah.
over time. But where I think it came from is with people comparing qual and quant in ways that they should not even be compared, right? Like there's that saying that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid, right? Like that's what's been going on for qual for too
Yeah.
long, right? If you judge qualitative research by its ability to generalize findings to a larger population or
Yeah.
by its ability to speak with 95% certainty about the relationship between the X and the Y, right? Like then of
Right.
course you're not going to see it as rigorous, but that's also not what qualitative research is trying to do. So,
Exactly. Exactly. I think speak facts 100%. Like you're like, how can you compare something that's clearly an apple to an orange, right? Like you just can't do it because they're
right.
doing different things, right? And they're just as rigorous, but you gotta look at what they're actually doing, right? And I don't know. I also get like, I have beef with that. That
Yeah.
whole like
It's
quantity
it's
more rigorous.
it's very frustrating, right? Because I mean, like, so okay, in qualitative research, for
Yeah.
example, right? Rigor looks like rich, detailed descriptions of the data,
Mhm.
different from quant, which often the goal is to tell a straightforward story about the research concepts.
Yep.
Rigor in qualitative research may mean nuance and complexity.
Yeah.
Depending on the type of qualitative study, rigor in qualitative research might mean time spent in data collection or, the amount of data that you
Mhm.
collect, which can help, readers and reviewers feel more confident that you've gathered enough information to support the claims that you're trying to make. So, there are definitely some ways that rigor and qual and quant is the same. So, for example, transparency about your
Yeah.
methods for like data collection and analysis, that's something that's value in both methodologies. But I
100%.
would say like in general, rigor is largely assessed differently in qual than it is in quant.
Yeah. And I feel like even just being in your course, like we learned about how like there should be different ways to assess rigor when it comes to like publications of like research as well, right? Or like when it comes to like wanting to publish in these certain publishers, I guess, or like academic
Mm-hmm.
publications. So that's something else I often think about too. Like, you know, I hope there's been a shift in how we kind of like distinguish the two within that, realm. What are your thoughts on that? I guess I know this is not the questions, but I just want your opinion. I guess.
Yeah, no, I do think that things are starting to shift. I think that we're seeing more and more like
Mhm.
programs, for example, like, graduate school programs and academic programs, like offering coursework in qualitative methods, which I think, the more people are better trained in
Mhm.
qual, just as well trained in qual as we've seen people be trained in quant, the more
Yeah.
people have the skills to receive qualitative research, right? The skills to receive it, the skills to critique it, and they know the criteria that they should
Mhm.
be using to critique it. So
Mhm.
I think that feels like a very positive and exciting direction.
Agreed, especially because it starts like at the start, right? Like when you're in school, like you're learning everything versus like
Hmm.
when you're in your career already and like you're kind of like, oh, like trying to figure it out or trying to distinguish the two, and quote unquote, or I guess like when if you were to ever critique it, like you would understand it more with that background. So definitely. I guess kind of coming into our last couple questions here. Why do you think qualitative research is especially important in today's society, like social, political, and public health landscape? Um, yeah, let's start there, and then we can kind of dive forward after that. And if you want to talk about quant too, definitely go for it. But
No, I'm gonna stick to qual for this one
okay, do
because
it.
I think that in this current age of, misinformation and increasing social and political polarization, I think that now, I guess more than ever, we really need to use our best research tools to understand the complex, like why that
Yeah.
guides people's actions, interactions, reactions.
Mhm,
I think that we need to lean on the research tools that we have that encourage power sharing, deep
mhm,
listening, humility, honesty, trust, respect.
mhm,
I think we need to be intentional about reducing the distance between the quote unquote researchers and the quote unquote researched. And,
mhm.
while qualitative research isn't the only methodology that's capable of doing that, I think it's definitely the best situated. And so I would love to see us lean much more heavily into qualitative research methodologies as we're considering where to go next, like at a national level for sure.
Agreed. I think it's perfectly situated. You know, I don't know. I just think about like where we are in time. and maybe the impacts, in the future. And even then, like in the future, using qual to capture or to research what's been going on, it's
Hmm.
perfect, right? It's perfectly situated. So I definitely agree. And I guess kind of moving with that, then, like, how do you think like public health researchers, how do you think like excuse me, how can public health researchers make research more accessible to communities we serve? And I guess like I'm thinking about like, the students that, SPH kind of, we're going to be out there soon. What advice would you give in that realm?
Yeah. Okay. So this is I have my advice and I'm like, I don't know how relevant this is going to be to the students who are just getting out there, but I'm gonna try.
Do it. Yeah.
So I think my first answer is community partnered research,
Yeah.
right? I think that, you know, you decide on the work, as in you
Hmm.
decide the research question and your focus, right? You decide on the work and you do the work in direct and equal partnership with the people that are most impacted by the public health topic that
Yeah.
you're focused on.
Hmm.
I think that when you're doing your work in that way, your partners will let you know what you need to do, where you need to
Hmm.
be, how you need to word it, and you
Yeah.
just need to listen.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's my like main advice. That being said, for those of us who are recent graduates and haven't built up our community partnerships yet and aren't engaged in a community partnered research project, or for those of us who are challenged in this current funding climate and don't have the resources to support a community partnered research project because it does take some coins.
Oh yeah.
Um, One question that I always ask myself when I'm communicating about my research is, would my grandma know what I'm talking about?
That's a good one. Hmm.
Because my grandma is not just gonna let me sit in her face talking all that academic, jargon, mumbo jumbo. She's gonna be
Like
like,
what?
okay, what, like, so would my grandma know what I'm talking about? Is
Yeah.
is the question I ask myself when I'm writing academic papers, when I'm preparing to give a talk, when I'm preparing a lecture for class. And if the answer is no, I know that I need to switch it up. And
Yeah.
so that is an approach that has helped me to make my talking about my research more accessible. And so I'm offering that to all of the listeners. Would my grandma get what I'm talking about?
Yeah, take that question, utilize it.
Right.
You're trying to do it. I love it, and I think, yeah, 100%. I often think that too when I'm like, when you're what is it when you're writing like public health papers, like who's your audience, right? You got to
Hmm.
think about that even in research. Who is my audience, right? When it comes to like any aspect of the research process, honestly. You mentioned something a little earlier in your response about like, you know, for students who are recent graduates, and might not have relationships within the communities they want to work with. And I know this is not in the questions either, but I'm curious to know what your opinion is on this, and if you have any advice for students, on how to build those relationships with those communities. Like, what do you think would be a good first step for them to take?
Show up.
Period. Tell,
Yeah.
tell me more. How do you think?
Yeah. I mean, f- figure out what matters
Hmm.
to the population that you might want to be building community with, or there might be a particular health topic that you're interested in. Figure out what matters, what events might be going on, where people might be gathering, and be there. Go there. Spend time
Yeah.
there. Right?
Yep.
And the thing that I'm part of a team of folks. We call ourselves Locate, LOCATE. Um, I wish I could tell you what it means. Long COVID awareness, truth, and equity. That's what it stands for. We're a research advisory group. We're a community partner group of folks. We've been working together since 2023.
Wow.
And something that we laugh about sometimes when people ask us, like, what's the secret? How did you do this? Whatever. I always joke, I'm like, as a researcher, like as a sort of like academically trained researcher, just like don't be weird.
Yeah.
It's actually that simple, right? Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we overcomplicate it so much, but like people are people.
Yeah.
right? And so just don't be a weirdo. Show up, be in community, be in conversation.
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's really all there is to it. But yeah, at the most simple level, it's just show up.
And I agree, and I want to add this. You kind of mentioned it with like the don't be a weirdo. Like, just show up authentically. Just show up
Exactly. Because, like, if you are a weirdo, then show up in that way and they'll get you. You know what I'm saying? Like, just be who you are is really the answer. I shouldn't even say don't be a weirdo because I can be a little awkward myself, right? Like, so if awkward is you, be you, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of us, right, have somehow found a way to meet people along this journey of life that
Yep.
have vibed with our frequency of weird. And I
Yeah.
trust that we will all find that in our community partnered projects if we
Yep.
just keep showing up.
Just keep showing up yourself, and keep listening. That's what I think.
Exactly. Keep listening. Absolutely.
Love it. All right, we're coming up to the end. So, is there any like last minute either words of advice or anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
I guess the one thing that I want to reiterate that feels important to this broader idea of shifting the balance of power,
Mhm.
shifting, you know, away from what we have traditionally been taught
Mhm.
is how, these relationships in research should be structured. I
Yeah.
think I just want to emphasize the importance of not just community engaged approaches, but of participatory approaches, right? And of approaches that are really actively and intentionally incorporating non-academic researchers directly into the
Yeah.
entirety of the research project and research process, all the way from study design and, grant writing through interpretation, writing up results, presentations.
Yeah.
um yeah, I just really want to emphasize that because I think that people who have been historically excluded from the research process, people who have been historically exploited by the research process,
Mhm.
there is so much knowledge, there is so much there's a wealth of information that people are willing to share and that will really enhance our understanding of a multitude of topics
Mhm.
if we are willing to take the time, if we're willing to slow down
Yeah.
and humble ourselves and build those relationships in a way that is, strong and enduring. And then we
Mhm.
can really go the distance, and ask and answer important questions.
Agreed, 100% agreed. And I just want to emphasize one more time the entirety of the research project, right? From start
Absolutely.
to end, right? The entire thing. So, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Community Level Podcast, Dr. Ford. If y'all haven't taken Dr. Ford's qualitative methods course, do it. It's amazing. Thanks so much.
CHSC 434.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning into Community Level. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. Join us next time as we continue to explore the intersection of research and community action. Until then, stay connected and stay level-headed.